Resident Evil 4 is by far one of the scariest games I've ever played. But why is it so scary? What factors play into how the game scares you? Today, we're going to be doing an in-depth analysis on how Resident Evil 4 scares you.
Six years have passed since that horrendous incident. I received special training via a secret organization working under the direct control of the president. I was to assume the responsibility of protecting the new president's family.
The game starts off with you going to investigate where the president's missing daughter has gone in a rural part of Europe. Just by this fact alone, you know something might be wrong with this village because she's been abducted.
Breaking the ice. Anyway, you know what this is all about. My assignment is to search for the president's missing daughter.
What? All by yourself?
I'm sure you boys didn't just tag along so we could sing Kumbaya together at some Boy Scout bonfire. But then again, maybe you did.
Did I mention I freaking love Leon?
Oh, you crazy American.
You soon get out of the van and begin heading into the village. Leon happens upon a cabin where he sees a man who he begins questioning. Leon begins to ask the man a few questions, but when he shows him a photo of Ashley...
Excuse me. I was wondering if you might recognize the girl in this photograph.
What the hell are you doing here? Get out of here!
Lárgate, cabrón!
Sorry to have bothered you.
Freeze! I said freeze!
This is your first battle in the game, and you notice that shooting different body parts can affect your enemies, particularly by shooting them in the face, which is basically the same as a critical hit. All of a sudden, there's a commotion outside, with sounds of the van Leon once rode in crashing, and the villagers seemingly begin to riot. The encounter in the cabin also was your first meeting with one of the local residents, and with him suddenly attacking you, this doesn't really bode well for the rest of the village. And considering what happened outside, things are already looking pretty grim for our hero Leon. Not only does it look grim for Leon though, if you go to check out the scene of the crash, you find the van, but not the people who helped get you to the area, which leaves you wondering, what happened to them? As you approach the village, you find a woman whose head has been smashed in with an axe. The game does a great job of building up suspense and tension, and there's definitely plenty of foreshadowing throughout the game. For example, you've been wondering what happened to your friends since you found the van crashed, and you see one of them burning at the stake. Later, you lock yourself in a house full of villagers and hear the revving of a chainsaw.
What are they planning? Chainsaw.
This is the first enemy you encounter that is, number one, unique, and number two, does not flinch when shot in the face, nor anywhere else on his body. If you haven't found the shotgun by this point, good luck. It's pretty easy to miss. Most people their first time through probably lost this enemy. I know I did. And if you do lose, it results in a pretty horrifying death animation. Ugh. See his head? Ugh. It's so hard to watch.
La campana.
Not understanding what the locals are saying adds to the tension even more. Most of them are pretty typical lines, but as we, the player, can't understand it, it's all the more scary. Even the final boss is mentioned as a voice line.
Lord Saddler.
And thus, Leon's favorite voice line of mine was born.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
I also wanted to point out in this section of the game where the language barrier is even more prominent as the enemies chant throughout the level while you're playing. They chant things like muere, 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 which means die, die, die. As well as cogerlo, cogerlo, which means get him, get him. If these voice lines were in English, they wouldn't be as scary at all, but because you can't understand it, it's that much more creepy. Because what you're not able to understand is what's most scary to you. Moving on, I wanted to talk about some of the side characters in the game and how likable they really are. Having an ally like Lewis in this village where everyone is your enemy is reassuring. And because you care for them so much, it scares you that they're in this situation because you don't want anything to happen to Lewis. And the way they play off each other is just natural.
You got a smoke?
Got gum.
Then there's the dynamic between Leon and Ada. Then there's the merchant who always makes you feel
Welcome!
that guy may be my favorite. Then there's Ashley.
Leon! 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 Help me, Leon! Leave me alone!
Ashley, wait!
Help me, Leon!
Damn it! Ashley!
She's so annoying. Ugh. At least the main villains are interesting. Speaking of which, let's move on to the different types of enemies. The enemy types are varied enough, so none of them really ever become stale. The locals near the beginning of the game all use things like dynamite, throwing axes, pitchforks, you name it. They use all types of weapons. At one point in the game, you encounter a completely different type of zombie enemy, which masquerades as just a regular grunt until you shoot its head off. The game does a great job of making you comfortable with certain enemy types and then throwing all you knew about that enemy out the window, which recreates that fear of the enemy all over again. Also, once the parasitic enemy is introduced, there's no way to differentiate them from just a regular local. You no longer know whether the parasite will pop out of a victim's head and attack you, or whether he's just one of the regulars. So when they do catch you off guard, get prepared to jump in your seat. Another point in the game, Salazar mentions insects down in the sewers that you will encounter. What he doesn't actually mention is that they're invisible and make these terrible footstep-like noises in the water that get louder as they approach you.
Oh yes, I let our miserable insects out for some exercise down in the sewer.
Thanks. That should keep me company, 'cause boredom kills me.
I look forward to our next encounter in another life.
Oh my god, it's chasing me. It's chasing me! Die, you piece of crap. Oh, god. Okay. I think we're good. I think we're good. There's more? Then there are these Wolverine-like enemies, and they can only be damaged by shooting in their back. And then, like, you don't think he's like, you're like, ha, he's trapped, and then you're like, oh! And then you realize that you have to stay as quiet as possible so that they don't find you. And it can get super nerve-wracking because they can literally be 1 feet, 2 feet away from you and you just can't move, and it's terrifying. Then there are the regenerators, which are by far my most feared enemy in the game. They're introduced with a note written by Lewis, with a man on an operating table seeming to be a failed experiment in creating the regenerators. As soon as you walk in, you hear this creepy, labored breathing. Shooting their limbs off will still lead to them crawling towards you. It's more or less the only good thing about the island section of the game, but more on that later. I absolutely adore some of the enemy design in this game, if you couldn't tell. The game is also pretty difficult for the most part, but I'm sure not many of you know this. It also scales its difficulty to make the game harder or easier depending on how well you perform. There's a link down below in the description on a video about that subject if you'd like to hear more about it. Another thing that developers get right is just continuing to constantly up the stakes, with wondering what happened to Ashley, to Leon getting injected with the virus and slowly but surely turning into a zombie, and this happening to Ashley as well, hoping that they'll get to find a cure before they turn into these zombie hosts themselves. And the developers were doing this from the beginning and just scale up the payoff of build-up every single time. An example of this is when Leon first fights the Big Cheese.
Perfect. The Big Cheese. What?
Yeah, his first encounter doesn't go so well, nor does his second encounter.
You carry the same blood as us, it seems. Nevertheless, you're an outsider. Just remember, if you become unpleasant...
He's about to choke Leon to death when he mentions that Leon has the same blood as them. Other than viewing an injection that Lord Sadler gives Leon earlier, you have no idea what the Big Cheese means by this. So not only do you have hordes of zombie-like beings chasing you around, Ashley to take care of, but you now have to worry about what you've been infected with too. The stakes have been raised, and it's Leon's job to solve all these problems now. And it's also his problem to defeat the Big Cheese, who's defeated him pretty soundly 3 times now, with Ada having to save him the 3rd time around. Let's see what happens in their 4th encounter.
Hasta luego.
Nice, Leon. Good stuff. You've defeated... Oh. Okay. Still, all things considered, this fight was
pretty awesome. Seeing him separate his upper torso from his lower body is one of the creepiest things ever, and honestly results in a pretty epic final boss for this area. One of the moments that stood out to me in particular is when Salazar sends his right-hand man to take you out. After wandering the tunnels of what seems to be some sewers, leading to some sort of power room, the game shows scenes of him chasing you at high speeds. Tentacles begin attacking you above and below ground, prompting QTE. He finally appears at one point as you wait for a shutter to unlock, and absolutely terrifyingly chases you throughout the area from that point on. Bullets seem to bounce right off him, with the most effective tactic being to lure him nearby liquid nitrogen tanks to freeze him and then unload bullets on him. I think the best part about all this is how the game introduces him. It doesn't actually show you him until you are trapped in a room alone and have no choice but to face him. Even after escaping through the shutter door, he still continues to attack you, with you having to find the nearest liquid nitrogen tank to repeat the process of freezing him and then shooting him again. This boss fight was definitely one of my favorites, as it didn't just involve you shooting very well. There were multiple layers of complexity involving this fight. Spatial awareness, dodging his tentacles at the right times, luring him toward the liquid nitrogen tanks, and then also waiting for the shutter door to open so that you were stuck in tight spaces with him. I just thoroughly enjoyed this fight. And like I said, a lot of the enemy designs in this game are just spectacular. As much praise as I've given this game, and as great of a game as it is, certain parts begin to rear their ugly head toward the game's conclusion that even lead future Resident Evil games away from their horror roots and into the action genre. The game quickly stops becoming scary and quickly becomes feeling like a generic third-person shooter with zombies, namely the island portion of the game. However, this video is long enough, and I would love to cover this topic in a future video. Please comment down below letting me know if that's something you guys would like me to make a video on. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed my reflection on why Resident Evil 4 scares you, and why I still remember this game as one of the best games that I've ever played. Thank you guys again so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It greatly helps me out and motivates me to continue producing content like this, and will also help keep you up to date on whatever future content I may produce. Again, thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys in the next one.